Welcome to Brain Scratch. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for joining me here today. We have another case to look into. Interestingly, I kind of caught wind of this case a few months ago, and I've been looking into it a little bit. The family did something, I would say, that's a little bit controversial. Maybe not everyone would understand this, but they actually released photos of their daughter's body at the scene where she was found. And I'm not going to share any of that in today's video. I did look through them literally for investigative reasons. I just wanted to see what could I describe to you guys about them that might be useful in the information that we're covering today. But Taylor McAllister's family, I can see they're in a lot of pain. They actually reached out to a community manager here on the channel. She got the information to them for them to get in touch with me. I've been communicating with her father, Bill, who's been extremely responsive, extremely open to any questions I have. Also sent over about 220 pages of information. We're talking police reports, autopsy reports. I've gone through it. I think I have a decent sense of what's going on around this case, and I think I have some very important questions. And if you look into this case, you're going to see there's a lot of people that are covering it in all kinds of different ways. The family has just been making a huge push to bring exposure to the injustice of what's going on around this case. And despite the fact that I try to raise exposure for cases that need more help typically than this type of case, because I'm seeing that this, I mean, they literally just ran a special on investigation discovery about this case. I want to add my voice to the cries. I want to support this family in their search for real justice, because you're going to see this case almost has all the elements of a case cracked. We think we know what happened. We've got charges and even convictions, but it doesn't seem like they're the right ones. So let's get through this together and try to come to some understanding about what happened to this beautiful young girl and mother, Taylor McAllister. And let's start with learning about where this takes place. This is in St. Petersburg, Florida. St. Petersburg is the 5th largest city in Florida and the 2nd largest city in the Tampa Bay area after Tampa. The city is often referred to by locals as St. Pete, with an average of some 361 days of sunshine each year and a Guinness World Record for logging the most consecutive days of sunshine. It's nicknamed the Sunshine City. St. Petersburg was also listed upon one of the top 3 places to visit in Florida. Sounds like a really beautiful place. Sounds like a place that a lot of people would appreciate visiting. However, in this alley, a very dark thing happens. It's really the start of a nightmare for Taylor's family. Let's learn more as we head over to tbreporter.com. St. Petersburg police seek murderer. And you can see this is posted literally on Christmas Eve. She was found just a few days before that on December 22nd. Taylor McAllister, 22 years old, was found about 7:45 a.m. on Thursday, December 22nd, by a man who was salvaging aluminum cans in the area of the 2100 block of 63rd Avenue South, St. Petersburg. Police said he saw the body of a woman in an alley separating an apartment complex from the adjacent neighborhood. He and another neighbor approached the body and confirmed the observation, then called 911. Detectives have determined she was the victim of a homicide based upon evidence at the scene. Now, if you do watch the investigation discovery footage or go to the family's Facebook page, of course, I have links to that in the description box down below, you're going to hear a bit of a different version from them in terms of what the initial assumptions were around this case. Here, we're seeing this article kind of calling it right out. Hey, the police are looking for a murderer. You're going to see, as we kind of go through the articles, there's a little bit of a shift in the narrative there. And according to the family, they might have not been actually approaching this as a homicide case right off the bat, because they weren't exactly certain why she died. They couldn't identify the cause of death just based on seeing her in the alley. We're going to get to that information, but let's go ahead with what actually happened in the investigation, and let's learn a little bit more about Taylor Ann McAllister, unfortunately, from her obituary. 22 years old, of Tarpon Springs, Florida, passed December 22nd, 2016. Taylor was born in Melbourne, Florida, July 21st, 1994, and was a graduate of Tarpon Springs High School. Taylor is survived by her beloved twin daughters, Charlie and Madison May McAllister. Her parents, Bill and Leslie McAllister. Siblings, Caitlin, William, Kendall, and Peyton. And her husband, Joshua. Taylor had an enormous passion for music and loved to sing and play guitar. She loved the beach, being out on the boat, watching the dolphins, and just spending time with her family and girls. Now, unfortunately, things didn't always stay as smooth as they sound here. The Investigation Discovery Special really highlights that Taylor got married, got pregnant fairly quickly after that, and it seems that just the stresses of becoming a mother and being in a new marriage, things were not going exactly great. So the marriage wasn't working extremely strongly at this point. I'm also seeing references through the police reports that I've been reviewing that there might have been some drug use that was going on between Taylor and her husband, honestly. And that might have caused maybe even a little bit of a further divide there, because it seems like there was efforts that were going on, you know, the family trying to help her, getting her into different rehabs, him eventually going into rehab as well. So there was just a lot going on around this. And unfortunately, does that play into what happened to her? In some way, it kind of does. But also, because you know that this is part of the backstory, there is that somewhat easy assumption to make that, hey, this is a drug overdose. I mean, we talk about it on the channel all the time here when a body's found in a strange location. What about that theory that this is a drug overdose situation and the people at the house were worried and they wanted to move that body somewhere else? Well, we're usually talking about it as a theory. And quite honestly, in today's story, I don't know that it's much stronger than that. Maybe I'd call it an excuse for today's story, but you're going to see what I mean as we continue here. Let's go ahead and head over and hear just a little bit more about the struggles with drugs over at the chrysalischapters.com. Taylor's parents are extremely candid about their daughter's drug addiction and how she struggled in the last few years of her life before her murder. She started to spiral deeper after the girls were born, and she was prescribed pain medication, Leslie and Bill recall. This continued and led her down a bad path. The drugs made her a completely different person. That's a very interesting comment. And once again, the author here, Lindsay, is pointing out something about the parents being very open about this, and obviously they are. There are other notes that I bumped into in the police reports talking about the fact that when Taylor was on drugs, she would be a very, very different person, to the point where it was actually burning out relationships of hers. People that were friends of hers couldn't be around her when she was that way. I'm not trying to come up with reasoning for what happened to her or anything like that, but just to try to understand the dynamics that are going on with her life at this point. Apparently, when she wasn't using, one of the most likable people you could run into, musician, as you can see here in the photo. As a matter of fact, she has a YouTube channel with a bunch of covers that she did. She had a beautiful singing voice and could play guitar really well as well. I believe she was self-taught. I mean, just amazing talent. But unfortunately, get her around narcotics and it was a bit of a different person. Now, from what I did see in the reports and all the investigation that they conducted trying to figure out this backstory, the only things that I'm seeing used are a type of prescribed pain-killing medication, Dilaudid, I believe is what it's called, and unfortunately, a form of cocaine. I'm not sure if it's crack in particular, but when you combine it with the information we're going to learn about who she was hanging out with, it kind of seems like crack is the assumption there. But let's continue here. Many members of the public have scoffed at her death while her parents seek justice, citing her drug use as a reasonable excuse for her demise. You guys know how I feel about that. You know, 1 in 9 people is struggling with some form of abuse of this nature. So if you love more than 10 people in your life, guess what? You're probably supporting someone in some way that's going through this, if they've told you about it or not. And just think if that person would all of a sudden disappear from your life. I mean, that's another thing about this. When we're looking for justice in these cases, it's not necessarily I mean, yes, it's about Taylor, but who is the justice truly going to serve? It's going to serve her family. It's going to serve her children. It's going to serve her siblings. It's going to serve her parents. Those are really the people that are going to benefit the most from it. So this reasoning, and I get it, you know, I know that I've been there at some point in my life too, where someone I saw was doing dangerous actions and I just wanted to separate myself. It's a way of protecting yourselves. I just don't want to be around that situation so that I don't get hurt. And unfortunately, when you're talking about a stranger watching it on a screen or something like that, it's very easy to just make that quick decision. Well, I'm not going to care about her because, you know, she was caught up in an addiction. And like I said, in terms of searching for justice, it's not fair because the justice is really about many more people than just the one person. Many people choose to focus on the lifestyle Taylor was living at the time, calling her a junkie and blaming her for her own death. Her addiction did not define her, Leslie and Bill state. Taylor was truly one of a kind. Anyone who met her fell in love with her because of her personality. She could make you laugh like crazy. Looking through the police reports, and especially kind of coming off the impression of it that has been put out by Taylor's family, which I know they're frustrated. I get that, and they have a very, very good reason for that. We're going to get to that. But I have to tell you, I was expecting to see a lot less work going on around this case in the reports. And I thought that the investigators were actually doing a pretty decent job of investigating the case. They have the pieces to this case pretty early on, like pretty much within the first 5 days after they find her. They've got all the major pieces already locked in. But what happens after that? And they're still operating in a mode where they're not exactly sure is this indeed a homicide investigation, like the initial reports kind of kicked out, or is this not a homicide investigation? Despite the fact that there's kind of that question lingering, I do see that there's at least some efforts that are still being made for them. They're interviewing people in the neighborhood. They're trying to find cameras that might be able to capture what's going on at the place at the time. They're not having a ton of luck with that, but I can see that they're taking the steps. It seems like they're processing it as I would say as a homicide investigation initially, but then you get things like this in the press. And this is a year later. St. Petersburg death investigation results in several arrests. So now we're seeing a little bit of a tone change in terms of, well, is this a homicide investigation? Now they're saying it's a death investigation, which kind of leaves the door open for this isn't necessarily a homicide. But what is up with these arrests? Let's see here at TB Reporter. After a year-long investigation, police served a search warrant Tuesday, December 12th at the Palm Harbor home of Robert Butler, who's 52 years old, and you can tell that's the guy in the upper left here. Officers said Butler's associates, Deontay Baker and Coron Archer, admitted to picking up Ms. McAllister, who was barely conscious at Butler's home in Palm Harbor. She died shortly after they left, so they left her body in the alley. I know, it's a ridiculous story, and unfortunately, they give kind of different versions of that story, and through reading through the police reports, when they first make contact with them, they say, we don't know what you're talking about at all, and, you know, no, we weren't over at Butler's house. I'm going to read you just a little bit of an email that Bill sent to me that kind of breaks out what their story is. Butler claims the days leading to her death, Taylor became sick. And let me just clarify here that essentially Butler is being described as being Taylor's sugar daddy. This is someone that let her live there. He's buying clothes for her. He's likely buying drugs for her. He's buying all kinds of different stuff. In his initial discussions with police, I can tell you he's not saying that she lived there at all. He's actually pushing more that, you know, she was a working girl and that she would only be there for, you know, services rendered, and then basically he would make her leave. We're going to see through the information that comes out that does not seem true at all. This really seems like a situation where she was actually living there, and some of these associates might have actually been living there too, but let's continue here. So he claims that she had become sick the days leading up to her death. He claims that he contacted Baker to come and take Taylor to the hospital. So supposedly his live-in girlfriend, sick for a matter of days. He's probably a user himself, doesn't want to call police or have the ambulance show up at his house. So decides to call some friends of his who are much younger than him and says, take her to the hospital. Like the whole story just on the outset, I'm really having trouble with in terms of belief. Baker was with 3 others at the time. He claims that he arrived at Butler's residence and Taylor was barely conscious, lying on Butler's bed, naked, moaning in severe pain. When she was found, she only had basically a t-shirt on and it was pulled up, so it was just all wrapped around her shoulders. So supposedly she's in bed, she's in pain. She had also urinated herself, if I recall correctly. Yeah. Baker told police Butler refused to call 911 and they made the decision to pick Taylor up and put her in Butler's truck to take to the hospital. There's one really important point I want to get in about that I saw in the police reports. And unfortunately, I can't remember. I think it was Baker that actually made this statement, but it might have been Archer. One of them described that when they were moving her to the vehicle, they actually moved her in the sheet from the bed. And that just kind of stuck out to me because thinking about moving someone who's alive, how are you going to move them in the sheet? What does that look like? Do you have someone that is grabbing the top side of the sheet and then someone else that's grabbing the bottom and you're kind of like pulling them into a hammock shape and then carrying them out to a vehicle? Would you really do that with someone that's alive? Do you wrap the sheet around them and then you're carrying them out? There's a very strange thing in my mind that's going on with the description of why are you going to wrap her up in a sheet? Admittedly, I guess she doesn't have any clothes on, but if she's still alive and you're telling her we're going to take you to the hospital, wouldn't you think that, okay, here, let's get some shorts on or something? It's just, there's an aspect where I'm really thinking about the possibility that she wasn't actually alive at that point. And imagine that description, if she wasn't alive, we rolled her up in the sheet and took her out to the truck. Seems to make more sense. So I'm wondering if that's a little tell in terms of the story on this, but you never know because there's so many different versions of this story that these guys are putting out there. So back to what Bill sent. An individual that was with Baker named Coron Archer then drove off by himself in Butler's truck with Taylor sitting in the back seat in an upright position. Archer claims he was unfamiliar with the area and was trying to find a hospital, but saw police and got scared. Archer said or stated while driving, Taylor fell over and there was an odor and he believed that she had died. So Archer then contacts Baker, who's following behind in another vehicle, and told him that Taylor was dead. They pull over at a gas station where the guys from the other vehicle I believe they leave that vehicle there. Now, Bill's not including this here, but I believe I read in the report that the guys essentially at that point all get into the truck with her. And they start driving around trying to figure out where they're going to drop her because they've called back and Butler is saying, don't bring her back here. Just get rid of her then. Baker says Butler told him to put her somewhere where she'll never be found. And Baker essentially said, no, we shouldn't do that. We should put her somewhere where she'd be found, relatively quickly. And that's seemingly the logic why they decide to use that alleyway. I don't know if it really holds up. I'm already having logic problems all over this story. First of all, why are you taking Butler's truck? From what I understand, Baker had a vehicle as well. He had to get there somehow. Archer might have had a vehicle as well. Who made the decision that it would have to be Butler's truck? In my mind, I see this conversation about, once again, if you put it in the context of her not being alive at that point, some of these decisions seem to be a little more logical or make easier sense to understand. Like, no, I'm not going to put her in my car. Well, you can go ahead and take my truck. It seems to make better sense. And then what's going on with, hey, my friends are going to follow in another car. And there's a little bit of a weird story in the reports around that too, where Baker says they were waiting for Butler. Butler was actually supposed to come with them, but all of a sudden he's in shock. Once again, that sounds like it's a lot easier to explain if she's passed away at that point. But they decide they're not going to wait for Butler. Then they get in the car. They catch up to Archer, but Archer has already passed the first available hospital, which is another thing that's really ridiculous. Let me just pull up a map real quick to show you guys what's going on with the drive around all this. So they're essentially up in this area right around where the 19 and the 580 are. And yeah, look at all the hospitals we have here. The closest hospital is about 5 miles away. That would be over here. But they've got hospitals just literally all over the place here. She's eventually found, let's go ahead and pull up this map. So this is where the house was, where they picked her up. So like I said, you got hospitals all over the place. Actually, it's a little further north than I originally said. It's a little further up the 19. She's found all the way down here. And another thing I'm wondering is, look at this location in terms of how close it is to the water. I'm almost wondering if they were trying to find some place to put her into the water, but were concerned about being seen, and then decided the alley was a bit of a safer spot because it was more secluded in terms of dropping her off. I don't know. But this is a lot of distance to travel, and they passed like, let's see here. They passed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They ultimately pass 8 hospitals by the time they get to where she's dropped off. Now, according to their story, she died in the truck along the way. So who knows how far on this trip they were by the time they get down there. But it's just one of the many, many things that's really hard to understand here. So let's see here. Baker admitted to running her over as they drove away. Just another aspect to this. Why would they have run her over? Essentially, there was tire tracks on both of her legs. So why would that have happened? And what's strange is, after looking through the autopsy report, outside of that, there's really no other damage that's described about her legs in particular. It describes a lot about what seems like trauma to her head, to her neck, and to her torso, and then a few very, very strange conditions, which are some type of residue that seems like glue from some type of tape that is found both on her face and on her wrists. So, but running over the body after you've dumped it out of the vehicle, I don't understand that, unless, is it an attempt to make sure that she has actually passed away? I don't know. I don't know. Bill continues that they all returned to Butler's residence, where they burned their clothing, destroyed the surveillance footage. I guess he had a camera system as well. Discarded and threw all of Taylor's belongings out in various apartment complex dumpsters, and got rid of the mattress that she was on. Yeah, and there's another very strange twist in that I saw in the reports as well. Taylor's guitar and her Bible were actually still at his house. And the police did take those, and in one thing that actually I thought was at least humane in this whole case, where it seems like nothing is really going that way, the police did release that stuff from evidence and got it back to her mother, I believe, a year later. So what's going on with these arrests that they make in December of 2017? Butler charged with felony possession of marijuana, failure to report a death, and felony in possession of ammunition. I don't know what the possession of ammunition, I would have to assume that he had some previous convictions so that he wasn't allowed to carry firearms anymore. That's probably the only way that that type of thing would stick. But failure to report a death, obviously we know what that's related to. Possession of marijuana, what's interesting to me about that is, if you read through the police reports, essentially they get a warrant to search his house because of this investigation, and they walk in, they see crack pipes everywhere. They find some marijuana and, find the ammunition. I believe there's also some weapons there, but I think that they actually belong to his son. So we get a felony possession of marijuana charge, but you've got crack pipes all over the place. And supposedly your dealer actually lives with you. I'm really surprised that there wasn't more charges that came out of this right off the bat. but we're going to see that the focus of the investigation is maybe more angled towards the drug charges than the death investigation. And I know that's a really big point of contention for the family as well, and of course it should be. Detectives also arrested as part of this investigation Deontay Baker, who's charged with failure to report a death and money laundering. Yeah, so there is so much money that's flowing through this house, and drugs apparently, that it becomes kind of, it raises to the level of the feds looking at this case as well. And it really seems like that is a shift in focus for the investigation. Quaron Archer, 25, was accused of failure to report a death. Archer was not taken into custody. There were other, you can see there's two ladies in here as well that were kind of caught up in some of these charges, but that's mostly related to the money laundering thing. And I'm trying to keep this focused on the injustice of what happened to Taylor, because it seems like, at least for this court proceedings, it seems like that wasn't the actual focus. Let's learn a little bit more about Robert Butler III. He is an heir to a carpet company that is popular in the area. His father was the founder of Bob's Carpet and Flooring, the chain with more than a dozen stores in West Florida. After they realized McAllister was dead, the men tried to return to Butler's house in Palm Harbor's Cobb's Landing neighborhood, according to arrest reports, but Butler allowed them to only remove McAllister's personal belongings and to have their truck clean, the men allegedly told investigators. So that's another thing. I mean, if we're talking about a situation where, yeah, they were really trying to help her. They got in the truck. They tried to get to the hospital. They didn't make it. Okay. Why is Butler now pulling everyone back to his house and then trying to clean up any sign of her actually being there, to the point of getting rid of the mattress and then, oh, by the way, take my truck and go get it detailed? There's just far too much activity on a cover up front for this to be holding together, in my mind, that she was actually alive when she left that house. It really seems to me like, what are they worried about here? Now, something else to note, they did talk to someone that usually comes and cleans up in his bedroom in particular. And she's saying that she was called to clean the week after this. She did go. She didn't see anything in particular. They asked her if she saw stains of any kind. She's saying she didn't see anything like that. The one thing that she says she did see was what looked like a woman's purse that was in his room. And I saw a couple of different notes to that. So it's one of those things where, even if you're trying to look at this case and you're saying, hey, look, we're going to have trouble prosecuting this criminally because we are having trouble proving that her life actually ended in his bedroom, let's say. It seems like there's a few little pieces. We know her guitar's there. We know her Bible's there. There's some type of cleanup effort that's being described by these guys that he's colluding with. It's, you know, we're not just talking about where there's smoke, there's fire. We can see the flames, but it's really still a matter of pulling in that final piece of proof, at least according to what investigators are saying here. And as I've kind of alluded to, Robert Butler certainly had some trouble before. Over at Tampa Bay Times, Bob's Carpet and Flooring heir was source of family strife before arrest. Bob's Carpet and Flooring issued a statement Thursday saying the founder's son has not been involved in business operations for 3 years. However, court filings from 2015 show that Robert Butler III and his two sisters benefit from family trusts, but have wrestled over control of their father's business, even before their father's death in late 2016. Just another quick little thing I wanted to point out there. I believe he only died a matter of weeks before this happened, and I'm just wondering about the emotional landscape of what his son might have been going through. Could that have pushed him into some type of violent act or something along those lines? I think it's just worth noting. The siblings traded allegations of drug abuse and misuse of company funds. In a 2015 civil case, one sister, Lori Smith, accused her brother of hurting the business, selling company products solely for personal profit, using company funds for personal expenses like excessive alcohol consumption, and being a bad company representative, including the time he was banned from a trade organization convention in Hawaii for egregious behavior. Butler started having legal trouble in the early 1990s when he was convicted of aggravated assault. with a firearm. So that might make sense for why they have the ammunition charge on him, according to a state criminal record. But I'm also curious more about the aggravated assault. What was that about? What type of situation are we talking about? Does that look like a domestic situation? Over the last 2 decades, he picked up more arrests, including multiple charges of drug possession. McAllister's parents said Wednesday that she was living with Butler in Palm Harbor before her death, a mother of 2. She struggled with a pill addiction, and friends believe the older man was acting as a sugar daddy, supplying her with drugs and money, according to her father, Bill. I don't know, guys. 30 miles, passing 8 hospitals. I'm always looking at the actions and can we understand the intent from the actions? And that's why this big question in my mind also of, were they heading for the water? Were they trying to figure out some way to get her into Tampa Bay or Old Tampa Bay, or possibly out into the ocean here? I don't know. It seems kind of strange that they went that far to get to a random alley that is only a matter of blocks away from the actual water. I have a feeling that's another thing in the police records. They found some discrepancies. You know, the way we tell the story, it sounds like there was one phone call where they called back and said, "Hey, Butler, you know, she's dead. What do we do?" And he says, "Don't bring her back here. Just get rid of her." The police actually found a different phone number, and they're saying there was a lot more communication, like over 20 calls that happened back and forth and back and forth. So that's just got me thinking that, yeah, this doesn't seem like it was well planned, but there might have been some other intent that was going on here with, where do we take her? Hey, take her to this spot. Okay, well, we tried there, but we couldn't because there was cameras all over the place. Okay, well, here, try taking her over to this spot. Oh, well, we can't because that's right next to the police station. It seems like with that much communication, there's really something else that's going on while they're driving around with her body in his truck. December 13th, 2017, over at WTSP, the death is being investigated as a homicide, although, according to St. Petersburg police spokesperson Yolanda Fernandez, McAllister's cause of death is still part of the investigation, so they're not saying how the young woman died. So you can see, even up to a year later, even with the warrants being executed, publicly, they're still just not being clear about the fact that, hey, this is a homicide. And I'm pretty sure at this point they already had the results from the autopsy. So I don't know why this is kind of being put out into the public forum in this way. But thankfully, more detail always comes out when you get to actual court proceedings. A year after that, so we're now talking December of 2018, there are court proceedings, but unfortunately we know it's on a weak charge. It's literally just on that charge about failing to report her death. And of course, you get a title like this when you have something like that happen. Family disgusted by short sentences in daughter's death. Taylor Ann McAllister was killed. That's what the Pinellas Pasco Medical Examiner's Office determined. The 22-year-old woman died of asphyxia, according to her autopsy. Officials ruled it a homicide. Now, when I first heard that the official ruling was asphyxia, I was kind of like, it just took my brain right out to, well, is that always a homicide? Not necessarily. You know, there's different ways that can happen. So let's just jump to WebMD real quick just to clear this up. Asphyxia happens when your body doesn't get enough oxygen to keep you from passing out. There's physical asphyxia, which happens when a force or object keeps you from breathing. And there's even a little variant of that, which is positional asphyxia, where someone might be in a situation with their body and the force of their body is actually pressing on their neck in a certain way and they're not able to breathe anymore. Then, of course, there's choking, when food or an object gets stuck in your airway. Aspiration happens when something you eat or drink goes down the wrong pipe and enters your airway or lungs. The substance crowds out the air in your body, and drowning, of course, is the most common form there. Suffocation or smothering. Suffocation happens when something heavy covers the face or chest and prevents you from breathing. It also occurs when you are in a place where oxygen runs out, such as a closed-in, airtight space. Strangulation. Another possibility here, but we're going to touch on an important fact about that in a moment. If a cord or a rope or other object long enough to go around your neck presses on the airway, it blocks air from getting to your lungs. Opioids affect your breathing. When you take too high a dose, it can slow down your breathing to the point that your body does not take in enough oxygen. The toxicology and the reports are extremely clear. This is not a drug overdose situation. And then, of course, seizures, epileptic seizures may make your breathing suddenly pause. Also, your body may move in such a way that your airway gets covered, blocking your breathing. So back to the suffocation or the strangulation. The autopsy is very clear about a lot of trauma around her head and neck, but there's one thing that's kind of missing in terms of a strangulation, at least a belief of strangulation, and that's that her hyoid bone has not been fractured. And very typically, not all the time, but very typically, that will be fractured if someone has been strangled, particularly using force. So it's got me just thinking about the smothering aspect. And let me tell you why. I'm trying to weave together the pieces of story from these guys. And I really have this belief that liars will stick to the truth as much as they can, because when they need to retell the story over and over, they'll be very, very close, and they'll only really lie about something that they very specifically need to block or cover up. And we've got this kind of constant storytelling about the fact that these guys went to the house and they saw her in bed, and she's already naked in bed and she's peed herself. So what I'm wondering about, particularly now that we know that we're talking about asphyxiation here, could this have been a smothering situation? Could this have been a fight between her and Butler, which is supported by some other things? His DNA found under her fingernails. His DNA also found, I believe, on a section of her neck. But then you have people that say, well, but you know, she was living there, and maybe there's other ways that could have been transferred there. I understand that. But talking about the scene of these guys walking in, seeing her on the bed, is it possible there was a fight, or he had been beating her up, something like that, and then suffocation or actually smothering was done? Pillow put over her face, something like that. He freaks out, calls up his friends. Hey, we have to get rid of her, get her out of here. Kind of makes more sense to me. And then in terms of, I know Bill was putting it really gently in the way that he described that they were driving around and all of a sudden there's an odor and they think that she's passed away. If she had actually defecated in the bed when they took the sheets with her, that would have gone along with her. So now that would actually be transferred into the vehicle and taken out of the home. It just, once again, when I consider a situation where she wasn't alive as of that bedroom, a lot of these little facts for me make a lot more sense than, no, she was still alive and they're trying to get her to a hospital. And there's another aspect to all this that I'm still kind of stuck on, and that is, you get it down to Archer driving in this vehicle. And it really, at that point for me, if she's still alive, it kind of falls on him in my eyes in some way. And I'm really surprised that the prosecutors and the investigators didn't aim in that direction. First of all, if this is, a drug den and you've got all kinds of money and drugs flowing through this house, there's a hierarchy. And obviously we know who has all the money. Okay. It's not hard to figure that out. And he's got his guys. So he's the top of the food chain. There's his guys. Who's likely to be the lowest on that chain? Don't you think that would be the person that you were making drive around with the body, or the person that is likely about to have a drug overdose situation, or whatever their excuse was for what she was going through? Wouldn't that have been the guy to squeeze to try to roll all this? But that's really where I understand the family's frustration, because it seems like the laundering charges and the focus on the federal level charges just pulled this case in a different direction. They wanted to work someone against the other person, but they didn't want to do it for Taylor's death. They wanted to do it for this money laundering drug scheme that was going on there as well. Back to the article. But there are no murder charges, no manslaughter charges. The only charges related to her killing are 3 counts of failing to report a death. That's what Robert Butler III and Quran Archer pleaded guilty to on Friday. We're disgusted, Bill McAllister said before the hearing. We're going to court for a misdemeanor because that's all failure to report a death is. It's mind-blowing how easy it is for someone to get away with murder. To charge someone with a murder, I've got to have evidence that the person committed the murder, said Chief Assistant State Attorney Bruce Bartlett. That's a lot of suspicion, a lot of finger pointing. I've got to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury down the road. And I understand that. I know this is not an easy case, but I also know there's this strange mentality going on with this case that like these three guys that were working together on this, that they're all somehow one brain or something. And that's the thing that I'm kind of getting stuck on with this. I don't see how they didn't run towards Archer. Hey, she was alive when she gets in the truck with you and all of a sudden she's dead and you want us to believe she just died in the back seat. Doesn't make a lot of sense, buddy. Guess what? We got charges coming your way. How did that not happen here? How did that not happen? I don't know. But they're trying to get other charges, it looks like. In one version of the story, Baker told authorities McAllister, a mother of twin girls, was dead when he got there. That's the story that makes a lot of sense to me that I keep pointing towards. In another, she was barely conscious. Archer said she died in the car. What is known is that Baker and Archer called Butler, who told them not to come back to Palm Harbor with the body. The investigation got off to a slow start, St. Petersburg Police Major Shannon Halstead said Friday, because detectives initially didn't have enough evidence to get a search warrant of Butler's house. Of course, I don't think I need to point to this too hard. You're also wondering about, this is a prominent family in the area, successful business like that, a lot of money behind them, probably a lot of lawyers behind them. Do you think that's protecting him at some level? I think it goes without saying. Hoping to find physical evidence from Butler's house, detectives surveilled the people cleaning it, the major said. Now, I don't know why he makes that statement. The weird thing is, I read that before I actually got the police records, and then I started looking through those for information that would actually verify that. And I do think that they knew about Butler early enough that that might have been possible. But then how did these guys successfully get rid of all that stuff? I mean, we've got Baker that is telling the police about, oh yeah, basically I was given this bag. I don't know what was in the bag. I took it to my girlfriend's apartment structure and we threw it in the trash there. If they were being surveilled for all these cleaning efforts, how are those items not recovered? You would think that those items would be super important to this case. So I'm kind of curious about that. I was also hoping for some notes because other surveillance efforts that they made in this case, I did find in that report, but this particular effort that they're saying they made on that, I didn't. So I don't know what happened with that, but if that really happened, that they were watching the people that were actually cleaning his house and all that was going on, they should have seen that there was people that were removing items from that house, and you would think they might have followed them to see what happened to those items. Butler pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 1 year in county jail. Archer was given 6 months. And of course, we have Baker facing all kinds of different charges because they're not running at him really for this case. They're trying to get him on money laundering, which apparently Butler actually kind of helps them with, lessens his sentencing on that. I think if I remember right from the ID special, they say that he gets 40 months on that. And Baker, I think, is still sitting in prison. There's also a very touching moment in the investigation discovery special where Taylor's mother goes and tries to talk to Baker about what actually happened and get him to open up to her. And one of the interesting things is he says, I was telling them, put a wire on me and let me go talk to Butler. And I'll get you guys what you need in terms of a confession around this, but they wouldn't do it. Now, can you really believe him for that? I don't know. Is he saying that in hindsight because essentially Butler worked against him in his trial? Possibly. I don't know. So many different things going on with this case. But I was also wondering about the charges. So they get him on those kind of weak charges. Aren't there other charges that could happen around this, like mutilation of a corpse? Do they have that in Florida? I jumped over and just did a quick search, and yes, they do. A person who mutilates, commits sexual abuse upon, or otherwise grossly abuses a dead human body commits a felony of the second degree. So how did that not happen? How did that charge not happen? I don't know. Another lawyer jumped in on this thread and said, in addition to criminal penalties, you can actually get a personal injury lawyer and file a civil suit on that as well. And speaking of suits, family files lawsuit. The parents of 22-year-old woman found dead in a St. Petersburg alley are suing an heir of prominent local carpet market chain, alleging that he neglected to get medical help for her shortly before she died. The lawsuit said the cause of McAllister's death was asphyxiation, but it did not describe what led her to fall sick. And I just don't know why they phrased it like that. This article is in 2018. We know the results on the autopsy at that point. We know that it's a homicide. She didn't fall sick, guys. I just don't know why you would state it that way. The lawyers also listed Deontay Baker and Quran Archer. Baker, according to court records, is facing federal charges of money laundering and conspiracy to distribute cocaine. Investigators have said he's a drug dealer who cashed more than $190,000 in checks during a 3-year period, passing the money through a girlfriend's bank account. Does that sound more important to you than a murder charge? I don't know, guys. One of the more recent articles I've been able to find talks about, it's weird because it seems like at the start of 2020, and maybe this is because of the family's efforts, all of a sudden the investigators are starting to post about this case on Facebook. And now we get this posting about more than 3 years after Taylor McAllister was killed, Crime Stoppers is offering a reward for information that helps solve her case. She deserves justice for what was done to her. We deserve it. Her girls deserve it. Our family. Someone has to be held accountable one way or another, said Bill McAllister, Taylor's father. The only person's DNA that was found on Taylor was Robert Butler's, on her neck and under her nails. He had fresh scratches to his face, said Bill. That's another thing. When they went to interview Butler, right around when they found her, they noticed, oh my God, he's got scratches on his face. He's got a bruise, I think, behind one shoulder. It looked like he was in a scrap. Once again, just a lot of information. Makes it look like there was something very serious going on between the two of them. And the strange thing is they admit it. Like, we know that she was there. We've got all these guys admitting it in some form that she was actually at his house. And we have the autopsy information that talks about all the trauma to her head and glue found on her wrists and her face. How can this not get put together as a murder charge? There's no in between. They dropped her off at the spot that she was found. Did someone come and do all that trauma to her after she was already dead and in the alley? No. So the trauma that happened to her had to have happened while she was in the custody of one of those 3 men. And once again, I get it. I know it's tough. I know what would happen with all those defense attorneys for each of those guys is they'd say, pick one of the other guys to blame, say that he did it. That attorney would say, hey, say that that guy did it. And the third attorney would say that that guy did it. And they would try to blow out the case like that. I get it. I know it's tough. It doesn't mean it's right to just not try. Taylor's mother, Leslie, says the last time she spoke to her daughter was through a text message in September that year when Taylor wished her a happy birthday. That's the last contact I ever had with her and never got to talk to her ever again, said Leslie. The choices that she made, that wasn't her. She got wrapped up with things and people that she shouldn't have, and it spiraled out of control. The McAllisters say her addiction didn't define her. They hope people will see her picture and hear her story and come forward with information that will lead to an arrest. And of course, if you have information about this case, we've got the details you need in the description box below. Please call it in. Please help this family find justice on this case. They don't have it now. It's weird because there's an aspect that I keep thinking of. Well, we've got them admitting to failing to report a death. You know, we've got the information from the autopsy report. We've got them admitting that she was there, essentially. We've got all these pieces. Is it possible that when Butler gets out in 40 months or whatever, that they're actually going to run some other charges and then say, well, he admitted to this and this and this, and use that as evidence in a new criminal proceeding against him? I don't think that might necessarily be completely out of the scope of what could happen here. So I'm hopeful that there's more information out there. And if there is, and you have it, please call it in. Please call it in. That has to be a component for them to be able to say, hey, you know, yeah, he admitted to it. We know that she was in that room. We know that they did this big cover up. Why would they have done all that? Oh, and here's the medical information that says that she had all these different contusions and bruises and hemorrhages all over her body. I don't know. Over at abcactionnews.com, Taylor's parents share videos of their daughter singing to remind her twin girls of the mother they hardly knew. They call her Angel Mommy, so it's very difficult, but we want them to grow up happy, said Taylor's mother. The family says they will never have closure, but they hope for justice, and we certainly hope for justice with them as well. There is a new update that they posted to the Facebook group Justice for Taylor 22. They just posted it 20 hours ago. Hello, Team Taylor. We have not heard back from the new detective assigned to Taylor's case. We didn't figure we would, so we're not surprised. I'm glad to hear there's a new detective. Just wish there was better communication, but I hear that all the time when I talk to families in situations like this. As their response is always, it's under investigation, or that's not our job to find the specific information that we ask for. We will post the emails we have sent in hopes that someone may step forward to help us. We'll give it until next Friday in hopes that he will respond, because we would like to request the transcripts for the interview of the 5th person there that night when Taylor was killed. So there's someone else that's part of this equation now too. Is it going to be helpful or not? I don't know. But if they were there around all this, yeah, I think if I was the family, I definitely want to see what they had to say about it too. We also don't know if the detective even interrogated him, although he is easy to find. He's in jail as we speak. Frustrating and disgust doesn't even describe what we're feeling. And when will we have someone actually listen, review the info, and do something about this? We don't know the answer to that question, but we won't stop. We aren't stopping. We have only gotten started. And I can tell you from the efforts I've seen, from them reaching out to people in my space, people throughout media, everything that they're doing to raise exposure to this case, I put money on that. They're only getting started. They're not going to stop. And I really hope that the investigators can come through for them. Knowing that there's a new one gives me just a little hope on this case. I know the family has heard some strange things from other members of the police force when it comes to things that are in cold case status. But I really hope that we see something different happen here. There is also the Leslie Bill McAllister Facebook page, kind of a shared page for Leslie and Bill. They make a lot of postings about the case here as well, so I'm going to include that in the description box below. And there is a Move On petition that's going on right now. It's got 1,600 signatures. I think it started about a month ago. I want to show them, and I hope that you'll join me with this, what an amazing community the Brain Scratchers are. Please take a moment, click on this link, sign this petition with me, and let's pop this thing up to at least the 2,000 signatures. Can you guys do that with me? I just need 400 of you guys out there. Do me a favor, take the extra minute, hit this thing, and let's get it up to 2,000. Please, please, please. In the description box below, also a link to a YouTube channel called the Bluestone Society. They are obviously a newer channel, just over 1,000 subscribers. I really think that you guys would appreciate the coverage that they gave to this case. They've also been uploading videos. They've got all kinds of police interrogation video with Butler. We see they've got Archer down here as well. They've got Leslie, Taylor's mom, actually speaking, going to the jail and trying to get answers herself. Check them out. If you want to dive into this case, this is the best place where you can do it. And really, I mean, there's hours and hours and hours of this type of content here, and you can hear these guys speak about it for themselves. And if you hear something there that you think I should know about, come back to this video and drop it in the description box below, or in the comments below, because I want to know about it. Here, I'm also going to include Taylor McAllister's YouTube channel. So you can please come here and check out Taylor with doing what she really loved to do, and what I think her family also wishes that she had a lot more time to do. And also something that gives me chills a little bit, we can see that the username for her YouTube account here safe as sound. In the description box below, I'll also have a link to a Reddit thread about this case. And keep in mind, Investigation Discovery, Still a Mystery is the name of the episode. Season 2, episode 17. So if you have YouTube TV, it's still available there. I'm seeing that there's some places where it might be posted. I don't know if it's exactly legal, but it's out there. So if you want to check it out, that's the episode that you're looking for. Before I end today's video, I need to thank several supporters that have joined on Patreon. Thank you guys so much. Starting with Monica Simpson-Allen and Rosie Castellan. That's probably a better way to say it. Really appreciate your guys' support. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com, where you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, or buy merchandise. All of it helps keep me here trying to do what I just can't stop myself from doing, trying so desperately to help families in situations like this. Bill and Leslie, I'm so sorry for what you're facing. Know that your team has just increased, not just by one, but also by the several thousand people that are going to watch this video and share it. And hopefully we can put an army together that's going to help you guys find justice. I know you guys deserve that. Take care, everyone. Have a safe and wonderful weekend. I'll see you back here on Monday with a brand new episode of Case Cracked on the Lord and Arts channel.